Yo, what up? It's your boy Freddy Ferocious back again with another bombing science tutorial. This time around we're going to talk about style and letter structure, two of the most important things in the graffiti game. Now, style is something that is completely subjective, though we can distinguish between good and bad. This is something that's up to the writer themselves. This can be conveyed in so many different ways, from your letter structure, which we'll touch on, for your fill, for your outlines, everything, and the way that you use the can. Furthermore, style is something we see every day. Style is something you have in your personal being, from the clothes you wear to the haircut you rock, all of that sort of stuff. We see style in our everyday life all the time, whether it be at a supermarket, film, television show, whatever. This is where you can really use the inspiration and influences you see every day in your graffiti as well. Now, with going forward with this, we're going to start off with the letter structure and sort of the basic elements of style within the letter structure. In letter structure, we know that the form is right or wrong, almost right off the bat. That being said, there's not one single way to kind of do this. You got to be able to kind of adapt and bend to make your style your own. You don't want to just do a simple style that looks, maybe necessarily like a font that's pre-existing. You want to have your own flavor on it, and that's what exactly style means. It's having your own aesthetic and pushing forward what other people aren't doing, and to make it your own and make it unique. Now, for this, we're going to start off with the letter A. The letter A is a very, very interesting letter because it comes with basically three sticks that kind of all interact and overlap with one another. Now, this has got a lot of ability for motion, movement, technical ability to kind of flare back and forth, and this is a good way for us to get the fundamentals down of a very, very, fun, exciting, and pretty simplistic letter. So, to start it off, we're going to do just a generic A, kind of the way that you would just write it on a piece of paper or on a chalkboard. Now, when you take a look at that, that's exactly how you would write it generally. It's pretty simple, line, line, line. Now, as you notice the way I did this, similar to back to our can control video, I kept it all more or less at the same distance away from the wall and at the same speed. Now, I'm using a New York fat, so as I said in the last video, this works for more or less any sort of style, whether you want to go fat or thin. In this case, it's a pretty regular, medium-sized letter. Now, I'm going to do a couple lines to add a little bit more of what we call style in it. That's give it a little bit more funk, a little bit more flair, and a little bit more pizzazz. Now, if you notice on this one, I kind of gave it a kick out on the leg. I kind of gave it a nice little sharp line coming down, and then it goes fatter across the middle, giving a bit more size in between the middle bar and the top, versus this where it's almost three equal parts. Now, this is really, really fun, and where you can have fun with your letters by utilizing how you think that the letter should look and putting your own unique twist on it. Now, we're going to try and do another version of the A by giving it a flare on one side, tighter on the other side, and then a quick regular medium line through the middle. Now, going to this, similar to what we were just talking about back in the first video, I did a fat line on the side, gave it a flare at the top, and then I came down to a thinner point on the right side with a regular medium line going through the middle. Now, if you notice the way that I put this going, it was a lot slower, it was a lot more controlled, and it was a lot further from the wall. And as I came down on this side, I let it kind of linger at the top, and I gave it that nice smooth cut down to the bottom to give it a more of a pointed edge. And that means I had to go quicker, and I had to get closer towards the wall. And then with this, I just gave it the medium, sort of regular level, sort of couple inches away from the wall, going at a normal pace. This prevented a lot of drips and a lot of oversprays that we didn't want, and it still made it look nice and funky and gave it that little bit of extra than just doing a regular kind of letter. And so that was also for a big letter A. We're going to go into a lowercase a right now and try to fool around with a little bit of the style of that. Now, when you think about a lowercase a, especially that you would write it in sort of cursive or something, it's going to look a little like this. That's pretty simplistic. It's the way that we normally would write it on a piece of paper, or back in the day when we were writing on chalkboards But this is a lot of opportunity to be able to mess with and to be able to really have fun and utilize also the techniques that we worked on in the first video with flares, skinny lines, and the variety in between. So let's try having fun with another version of the lowercase letter A with the spray paint. And so if you notice the way I just did this, I implemented a lot of the different techniques that we talked about. I gave it the fat line on the outset, I gave it the regular middle line at the top, and then I brought it down to a thinner point on the right side. This utilizing all of the stuff that we said in our previous video and what we talked about with the big A. Furthermore, you can take a look at being like, yeah, this has got its own little style. It almost looks like a 2 or a backwards 5. It doesn't really matter what you think it should look like. This is where we're venturing further into the letter and breaking the rules. Now, what I'd like to say at the beginning of doing the first letter A, this is more of a hand style letter A. And this goes in towards tags and various certain elements, maybe shout outs or something like that on a piece. Now we're going to move from the hand style version and get into a more throw up version, or bubble letters as some people like to call them as well. What I also like to mention at the beginning is I was really getting myself prepared and in my hip hop stance with a nice solid position, looking forward, can directing forward, and everything was going exactly in the way that I wanted with a central balance. Now I'm going to do the similar thing with the bomb style letter A. We're going to play with that a little bit, but I'm going to get in my hip hop stance and I'm going to face forward and really look at what I want to do, because now we're getting a little bit bigger and we're getting a little bit more free. So you really want to have control of your surroundings and definitely understand where you're going with the can. So also with that being said, I realized not only do you want to know that not only do you want to know your surroundings and what's going on in front of you, when you're facing a wall, you're not going to know what's going on behind you. So this is oftentimes what people want to have a spotter or someone keeping 6. Now keeping 6 means somebody taking a look at what your back is, because 6 o'clock is like the back of you. Now, in this case, we're just painting a legal spot. So that means we don't necessarily need this, but definitely keep that in mind if you're out hitting the streets. Now it's important to be wary of who you tell that you write, because there are a lot of dangers out there. There are heroes, snitches, and just people who plain old hate graffiti. So don't be going around telling every single person that you know that you write, because you can wind up in some pretty hot water. Because it's like leading a double life. Similar to Batman and Bruce Wayne and other comic book characters, we are living a double life, and you've got to be cautious about who you tell. And like Batman, it's time to go paint. Now, for this bomb style A, I'm going to get a little bit looser, I'm going to get a little bit bigger, and I'm going to have a little bit more fun. But we got to keep in mind, proportion is key for all letter structure. Proportion means that things are supposed to be right place and the right time. Now, when looking at something like this, it can be a little bit different, but it still matches proportionally along the wall. Now this is something that will change from time to time, and this is also not a golden rule that has to be followed completely. It's just something that we keep in mind when the fundamentals are going down. So now I'm going to get my hip hop stance and I'm going to start to do a bubble letter A. In this case, I'm going to go with a big letter A just to see what this looks like. Now this might be a little bit harder to see just because it's the pink over the blue, but I'm going to guide you through it. You'll notice that I kind of went from the right side to the left side, which generally doesn't happen too much because we write from left to right, but this is still my left leaning letter. So that would still be the left, then the right, then the right, then the right. That meaning we're still going to be moving from left to right as if we would on a piece of paper and we're writing a note down. Now if you notice here, I had a little bit more style, a little bit more flair, and a little bit more pizzazz to it. Kicked out the letter, and it had 2 different legs that are kind of going in between, and then just this little point that is going to signify the whole of the A, which is completely different than how we would do it on another one of these, where the whole is actually the wall. This is sort of standard practice in bubble letters, because just doing a little tick in the middle is a lot faster than trying to make it a hole on its own. So, and that being said, we'll do a lowercase a so you can see how that one works as well. Now for this one, I definitely got a lot more style going on with it. It's a little bit free-flowy. I had to move my arms more and more around, but it definitely gives you the illusion of what we want here. We got a big round bubble, and then we've got the tail kind of coming up the top. Similar to that you've got it here, where you've got a circular portion, and then the tail coming off the back, almost as if it's a cursive letter A. It's a simple but effective way of doing the letter A for a bubble letter. However, there's all different types of ways to do it, and that's left up to you, and that's left up to your own version of what you think a letter A should look like. So now moving on from the bubble style letters, we're going to move on to something more kind of like the straight letters or the piecing letters. These tend to be a little bit more developed, a little bit more refined, and a little bit more solid looking in a way. So like always, you're going to want to keep in mind to get in your b-boy stance, your hip-hop stance, and get looking directly at the wall and know exactly where you're moving things. Now, similar to the bubble letters going bigger than the hand styles, these are going to be bigger than the bubble letters. You're going to want to utilize full range of motion, but you're also going to want to be in control. That's why the center of balance and the hip-hop stance is important. Let's get into a letter A in a way that we might generally find correct, but we'll probably see it as being incorrect. Now, that looks okay, and that's generally how you think that you should be doing it. But in fact, as we talked about with the sticks being the different levels, we're going to utilize the sticks to our advantage to make sure everything's in correct proportion, unlike this, where the top and the middle and the side to side are wrong. Okay, now moving on to doing more of the stick portions like I said. Take a look at an interesting way that you may not have generally thought about doing your letters, but that will really help you in the future. Now you see, by making them all different size sticks, or more similar size sticks, and putting them over top of each other, and that gives the correct proportion that you want. Unlike this, where you kind of worked willy-nilly all around, and it doesn't really give you the size or the scope or the proportion that you're looking for. Now I know you're thinking to yourself, oh, there's all of these unwanted lines there, which you don't get in this. But we're going to be fixing all of that in other theory and fills coming up in the next video. This will help us go through the ways to go back over these lines and so that they disappear forever, which I'm assuming that you probably know already. Now if you notice, I actually went a lot smaller than my throw up. And that becomes a big problem because when you're doing a piece, you're going to want it on a much bigger scale, much bigger than a throw up or definitely a hand style. So the problem with that is I didn't take a step back. You got to take a step back from time to time in order to see the size and the scale that is correct for the wall space. So after looking at that, I take a step back and I noticed throw-ups down here, throw-ups up here, and the little letters in the middle. That's not going to roll. So I'm actually going to get back in my hip-hop stance and do bigger lines to really fill up the space. Now after doing those lines, I've noticed, yeah, we're getting into a better size. It could probably still extend from here and here, but we're going to actually talk about that right now with a different sort of proportion. So now I grabbed a new color just to be able to see what I'm doing. And this is paramount in all types of painting. If you ever notice there's something you don't like or something you don't want to have on the wall, you just grab a different color and go over it, and this will help see a new guideline. And so now I've grabbed a new color in order to see where I'm going to be going. Now, I got hit here with the handle of the door, and that's a bad thing because it's going to ruin my whole line. So I'm actually going to shift over a little bit and get myself a little bit more size and a little bit more gap in between. uh-oh, that looks wrong. Well, one thing is for certain, this side is way too big, this side is way too thin, and this isn't even straight. Now that's one thing that you got to remember. Proportion is key, and that is paramount to the way that you do your letters. As I said before, if you have incorrect proportions, you're going to know right away, and there's nothing worse than when something's wrong. Now, as I can see clearly over the darker color where things went wrong and where things were sort of okay. So now, with a lighter color going over the other lighter color, which was the red going over the purple, I'm going to clean up what I have right there just to give it the right proportion. Now I actually don't mind the size of the left bar, but the right bar is too thin and this isn't even straight. So let me get in there and do a quick couple lines to fix it up. So that's a letter that I'm looking more enthusiastic about, and I think that that's important. Every time you finish off a letter, you should be enthusiastic about it too. Now, all of this is to say that I just kind of thought of this letter A, based it on a regular letter A, as you can obviously tell. But oftentimes when we're sketching or we're painting, we're using influences and inspirations from a lot of different things. Now what's crucial is to remember is that you don't want to be biting. Biting is copying someone else directly. We all have influences and inspiration from all over. And that's very, very good to the development of anybody's style. Make sure you're not going on Instagram, on a forum, online, and just copying someone's work verbatim. This is one of the biggest no-nos in the graffiti game.